because when I came home after 8 years, I paroled out to my brother's walk-in closet.
I still got 3 years of parole left.
Hello, guys. It's Brennan Izzy with From Felon to Fabulous. We have Susan Robinson with us. She has got an interesting job. I mean, a really interesting job. So I met her. Her parents went to, well, her mom still goes to our church. Her dad just passed not too long ago. But I met her parents at my church, Faith Bible Fellowship in Atchison, Kansas. So I actually met her at her dad's funeral. Then I found out what she did. And I thought, oh my goodness, she needs to come share. So I'm just going to turn it over to you. Tell them what it is that you do, where you work, and how it all comes in.
I actually work for an insurance company that covers Medicaid in the state of Kansas. And my title is actually, it's kind of glorified. It's called Transition of Care Coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
But what that simply means is that I get to work with a plethora, or a lot of people that are in a lot of different locations, and helping them and assisting them to get back out in the community. So
when you say locations, where exactly are they?
So one of the big ones, of course, as we're talking on this, is the Department of Corrections with the Kansas state. I get to work with individuals that are, a lot of people say they're paroling. I always say they're discharging, because they're in a facility, just like somebody's in a nursing home or a hospital.
That's true.
And they're working on plans to go to the community. And that is a discharge. And, you know, there's no reason to look at it any other way, because you have to set up services. You have to engage in conversation, make sure that people are going to be safe, healthy, and happy, and be able to stay in the community. You don't want to set people up for failure. Right. So
yeah,
that's my job.
We talked a little bit about that before the show, that sometimes the states do set them up for failure.
Absolutely.
And that's very unfortunate, especially those. You were just sharing that you just released a 75-year-old. Talk a little bit about that.
So, you know, I get at variable times, get called in to assist with transition planning and discharge planning. And sometimes I get a lot amount of time. Sometimes I don't get a lot amount of time, but I got a referral for a member who was discharging out of the Department of Corrections. He is elderly, has some pretty big health concerns, you know, just because he's getting older. He's, you know, he was in for since the mid to late 70s.
Oh, wow.
He hasn't been in the community since then. And so really worked hard on making sure to educate the transition planners from the department, as well as parole officers and individuals in the community on what options there are. Someone in the state of Kansas that's over 65 is eligible for what's called the frail and elderly waiver. And so that's an automatic. You don't have to have a disability. You just, because you're elderly and you have income requirements. And so, really making sure to educate everyone on what the options are so that we can have that safe and effective. One of the great things about that is that opens up opportunities for residential locations. A lot of times, you guys have probably heard about those, like was said on to, as we were waiting to come online, I was discharged to a closet. Well, that's not a good discharge plan. You need to have these supports available in order to maintain. And so, we have what's called assisted livings in the state of Kansas and home pluses. And so, he had the opportunity and was accepted. We worked around a lot of things and, he's been out now. It'll be 7 days on Friday. So,
Awesome.
we're working towards great planning for him. And so,
And it is planning.
It is.
Yes.
It is. And that's what it is for everyone. You and I plan every day. We set our alarms the night before and we say, okay, I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Then I'm going to be at work by 8 and I'm going to, eat lunch at noon and I'm going to have supper by 5. And, that's a plan.
Right.
And a lot of people don't think about that. It's, this is just you being you. No. We plan. Because if we didn't have a plan, everybody would run amok. And I would run amok. So, yeah.
And I think it's really neat how you said they're discharging, right? Just like any other facility that they would be exiting. And I feel like that just in itself allows them to keep their integrity intact.
Absolutely.
And when they have that opportunity to feel whole, even though they're maybe still broken a little, it just gives them an upper hand when they come out. They're more receptive, right, to the help that's out there versus just when you call it parole and all the steps you have to go take with your parole officer as well, aside from the discharge.
Yep.
It's like you're giving them that piece of normalcy and you're the first line of defense right before they even got to their parole officer. So I think that's beautiful that you choose to do it that way, because I just would imagine it just adds another benefit to them.
Well, and one of the things too that I always look at, with the there are certain times that I don't do this, but the normal piece of my process, I don't even look at why they're incarcerated because it doesn't matter to me.
Right.
Because,
But a lot of people do.
your people. Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
And I try to focus, and I try to educate, because when individuals do discharge, we try to provide that case management piece and that support piece to help continue to move on and be successful, whether that be part of, employment for our younger individuals, making sure that, if somebody has a disability, making sure that they're in contact with those individuals, mental health, substance use, all of those things. We want to make sure to wrap people around, create that family without the family sometimes.
Oh, yes.
And that community. And so, it's just really important not to focus on what someone has done, but rather what future they have and where they need to go from there. And so, that's something that I always focus on.
How'd you get involved in this?
Well, years and years and years, I not to date myself, but I originally started out, back in college with the focus of, I'm going to do case management for individuals with developmental disabilities. That was one of my big goals. And then just because of the nature of things, I got experience with case management, moved on. Then I actually worked with an individual who was an ATF agent that was on a run trying to track down an individual and got hit by a train.
Oh.
And so I got the opportunity to work with him, dealing with his brain injury and dealing with what his needs were. And in the process of that, got pulled back into Kansas. So I do have a specialty with brain injury now.
Okay.
And so just experience. And so I always express, there's always a plan in people's lives. God has something to go with, and he puts you where you need to be when you can be there. And I worked for another insurance company who lost the contract. And when I came in to interview in this position for the same type of job, they said, I don't want to hire you for this. And I was like, Okay, then why are you interviewing me? Oh, no. I have this job that I want you because I think you'll fit this.
Wow.
Well, I didn't even apply for that job. I never even had looked at that job.
Mhm.
So by that, I got the opportunity to start experiencing this. And then just
I love that.
after the last 5 years, I've, gotten in contact with Department of Corrections, worked those discharges, worked state hospitals,
Wow.
all of those things. So it was just all in his great plan. So
As it
Absolutely.
always is, and we're
Mhm.
thankful for that. You keep saying things that really resonate with me as an intentional healer. You said that you give them you allow them to build family, right? Or give
Mhm.
them a sense of
Mhm.
family, and that's something we've really learned with BTBY and AYPN, is that sometimes our families aren't always
Mhm.
good to us,
Mhm.
right? They don't always bring us peace, but it's okay to know that you can make family
Absolutely.
with people that aren't your blood, and they'll
Mhm.
be more willing to be there for you and stuff. So again, that's another great tool you're giving them
Mhm.
as they're getting out, to know that, because I'm assuming that a lot of these inmates, they get discouraged because the family doesn't visit them all the time.
Mhm.
So when you hear family probably in that situation, it could surface not so good feelings.
Mhm.
But when you tell them, no, we're here, we're a community, I'm here for you. We have like-minded people who have gone through this process, who
Mhm.
understand, and they want to be there for you and support
Mhm.
you through this.
Mhm.
Like, that's beautiful. That's, go out there and make your own family.
Mhm.
You gotta seek your peace, seek your happiness, but family's not always blood.
Mhm.
And I like that.
Yeah, and that's one thing too that I think is really important. And I draw this in my personal life as well. Like you touched on, family's not blood.
Mhm.
Family is what you develop. Family is the circle that you create,
That's right.
and you have different layers of that circle. You have your close circle,
Mhm.
and you keep going out. And that kind of we where I work deal with a lot that's called Charting the Life course, and it's a program that's really resonating in the state of Kansas now. And it really talks about, building those circles, your choices, how your choices and consequences for those choices, where are your stars, where are your support systems, all of those things. And, it's again, like we were talking earlier, we all do planning every day, and we all chart our life every day, and how we choose to follow and what we choose to follow in that charting. And we have individuals who are forced, upon our people that we're working with discharges, they're
Yes.
forced to deal with parole, they're forced to deal with their corrections officers,
Right.
they're forced to deal with probation, they're forced to deal, sometimes they're forced to deal with family that they don't want to
Right,
deal with, because
right.
that's the discharge plan. And knowing that even though I'm forced to deal with these individuals, that can be a great support or can be a negative support, understand that there's always someone else out there that you can find, and you may have to seek them out, or they may seek you out.
Yes.
And you just have to make sure to support them as you're doing that, no matter what. So,
Right.
So what's the youngest you've discharged?
so funny fact, I actually have worked discharges for individuals as young as 12.
Wow.
Wow.
And of course, you're dealing a lot with foster care system and that kind of thing, which, that's a hefty row to hoe for
couldn't
both the foster
imagine.
care providers, as well as, you have multiple discharge plans for a child like that, because,
Yeah.
they've been discharged from their biological home into the system,
And
from the
now
system into
system.
another system,
Yes.
and from that system into another system. And those support mechanisms are not always there, because there's such a huge gap in available resources, available families to support kids. There's a lot of trauma involved with individuals that are in the foster care system. You have your mental health concerns across the board for everyone. And so yeah, out of the juvenile correction facility, we've had that. Most recently, I've done a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old. And, it's just, there's a lot of planning. And, especially when you're dealing with, there are some times when you're dealing with individuals who are incarcerated that, they have a lot of difficulties, and it's hard for them to re-engage with community and family,
Yes.
not their biological, but because
Just
community
people in
is
general.
just people.
Right. Right.
And so, it's one of those things that it's very heartbreaking, but it also gives you a goal to keep moving to make things better. So
How do you vet the families that you're turning them out to? Is that a
So
different department?
that's something that we don't have to worry. Oh, you mean as far as any age?
It just, yes, in
Yes.
general.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, unfortunate or fortunately, that is more parole.
Mhm.
Parole is very responsible for making sure that this is an effective discharge. But there's a lot of checks and balances that can go along with that we want to make sure to set up success for both where they're discharging to, but also for the person to have the opportunity to be
Yes.
successful. But you also have to be very open and honest. And that's something that when I talk to individuals, not just with Department of Corrections, but any discharge, the minute that you don't tell somebody something, whether intentionally or unintentionally, that's what's going to come back and get you in the end. So, being open and honest, and understand that there are going to be people that are always going to say, and going to hold that prejudice against you.
Oh,
But you know
do.
what? Those are the ones that you don't have to deal with.
That's right.
It's kind of like your aunt at the family reunion that you really don't want to touch or be around because she's just, has that look all the time and just isn't nice. You're going to have those people. We have those people in our lives, and it's just a matter of how you deal with them and you move on. And so, but being honest and open about everything, because fact of the matter is it's public information. So if I don't tell you the truth about what I'm doing, somebody's going to find it, whether it's on social media, whether
And
it's,
they will do
and they
things
will
to
just,
hurt you.
and then they will try to intentionally set you up.
Yes.
So, it's one of those things that I always talk to, I always talk to people, and I'm a very transparent person. People, you can ask my family members. If you ask me a question, you're going to get the answer. So don't ask me questions. And, and I tell that to the individuals that I'm working with. I'm like, listen, I'm going to be totally honest with you, but you got to, you've got to reciprocate that honesty to me. And it works out really well because, I don't care what you did. Do not care. That's in the past.
And that says something about you.
Yeah,
because
it's
so many
where
people
I was going
do.
with next.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, I just feel the authenticity in your presence. And I feel the passion that you have behind what you do and how you serve. It sounds like a big job, though. So would you say that's common with the people you work with, or are you?
So, I'm lucky in the fact that I have been able to surround myself with a few individuals that have the same, that we're like-minded, and even though we know what things are going on and the reality of situations, we in our hearts are here to help people.
Right.
And not really to the old phrase, not give them a handout, give them a hand up.
Yes.
And because, everybody sets their own standards. Everybody, I'm not going to force you to fit into my box. And so I've been lucky in that, and not to say that we have to debrief a lot, because there's some pretty, difficult situations that we work our way through. And so the trauma that we experience, that secondary trauma, is hard. And so, we do a lot of that. And so, but I have been blessed to be able to have in my direct circle of coworkers, great people that, we've drawn together as magnets, so to speak. So it's really lucky for us. So
that's awesome.
I think I want to say this. How many have you discharged that have come back?
So, there's been a few. I've been really, again, I keep using the word blessed, but the individuals that I have worked with have really blessed me in that I haven't had a lot that have returned back. So, my percentages are pretty low. I'd say probably 20% or less.
That's pretty good.
And so, not to say that there hasn't been hiccups, but the true, reincarceration rate has been very low. I will say too, though, that of late, if you can have an easy discharge plan, I've been lucky in the past several years that they've been, there's been a lot of high needs, but I've been lucky in that they've been set fairly smooth.
You think that's
they're
because
getting
of the
worse
planning?
now. Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. The longer, I had a meeting when we were talking about, I'm in the process of discharging 3 individuals right now. And I called, a lot of the leadership with Department of Correction. I was like, we really got to start doing this a little earlier than what we're doing. Ideally, I would love to have, they're notified several months in advance of, hey, here's the proposed discharge
Right.
date,
Mhm.
and I was like, as soon as that date drops, I would like to be called in,
Right.
because the more time we have,
Mhm.
the more effective the discharge
Oh,
plan.
yeah.
But I've also had, the phone calls that, hey, they're discharging in 5 days.
That's what I was going
Let's
to ask.
go.
What's typical
Yeah.
time that you get to plan this discharge?
So
for them?
I've worked a discharge where we worked on it for about 6 months,
Okay.
and that was
Wow.
perfect. It was
Wow.
ideal. And that was a lady who was coming out of the Topeka Correctional Facility, and she is discharged her, I think it was 2019, and she's still out, successful
Oh, that's good.
job,
Yes.
engaged with services. So, and it was rough the first couple of
Mhm.
months, but, she went to a provider, she went into a group home, and she went to a provider who really wrapped her, and they were like,
That's
we're
good.
not giving up on her. And
Yes.
she's doing great. But
Support's a big
yeah.
deal.
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely.
And if you don't have support, that's what causes some of
Yeah.
the recidivism.
Well, and I will tell you, there's been a couple that people who are coming into our insurance plan that were discharged without our involvement. And the way that we find them is because they end up in the hospital,
Oh,
or they end up, at the state hospital or whatnot. And it's just because the supports weren't there.
yeah.
And discharge to a homeless shelter is real. And, when you have physical health issues, when you have, because it is safe, and we do it from the hospital a lot too. And, dependent upon the needs. And there's also choice. There are individuals who that's where they want to go. And everybody, no matter where they're at in their own life, whether they have a guardian, a power of attorney, or whatever, they still have the right to choose, and the right to, understand consequences, understand that, they have choice. And I also think that that's a big thing, is because, the minute you start forcing people to do something that you want, that's when it's going to go bad.
Right.
You are so right.
Right.
So
What's the worst thing you've experienced in this?
the worst experience. It probably most recently I had a kiddo that, we worked the discharge plan, and we continue to work the discharge plan even to this day. And he was let out, but it was, a lot of brick walls put up, because he really needed he had brain injury that was undiagnosed because of, self-harm. And, it's just really hard to get the medical care that you need. And it's, the department wants to provide it. But, there are limited resources.
Right.
And you're not going to get a specialist to walk in those doors,
Right.
and so really accessing that. And I think that's a difficult thing for me, because I want to make sure that people have what they need.
Right.
And when that barrier is put up, whether intentionally or unintentionally, just because of the way that processes are, it's difficult for me. And so that's probably the roughest thing, is just, what can I do to make sure that this is going to be okay? Or,
Right.
It's
we can go
refreshing
the
to
right
hear
direction.
you have such a positive impact on them, and that you want to be.
Mhm.
Because so many, and I'm not going to say so many, there are some that they want to see them come back.
Mhm.
I don't understand that. And so in that whole circle, that vicious cycle, including myself, when I have to go in to talk to somebody, I feel like, oh no, what are they going to do this? And I ended up having to go in and talk to an AUSA on my case not too long ago. And she actually said, we want you to succeed. We see what you're doing.
Mhm.
And I was shocked,
Right.
because I thought I had a prosecutor that hated me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I hear stories a lot from correctional officers or inmates, as Bryn, who, when they came out, they became friends and officiated each other's weddings, or did stuff like that. I would imagine these people really get bonded to you, because you're, again, someone who they feel who probably very authentic, who cares, and who truly is helping them with the next step.
Yeah, I don't think there's too many of her in there.
Do you find yourself befriending some of these people, or do you have a story where you've got invited to their wedding or anything like that?
So not to that extent, because I'm kind of one person removed. I'm kind of that,
Okay.
kind of the planner piece,
Okay.
you know, and the
They
puzzle,
don't always
the
see
puzzle
you.
person there. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's usually my coordinators and, you know, those direct case management people.
Okay.
And of course the discharge planners from the Department of Corrections and those kinds of things. But, you know, there are a couple of those lengthy cases that, you know, for instance, the one I was talking about, that was my first success, and not my success, her success. I just got to carry along with her. I did get to go and meet her when she was out
Oh, that was
after
awesome.
about 4 months. And so I went in, and she was like, "You're the one that helped me get
Oh,
here."
that's
And
good.
that was, you know, I was like, okay, there's my reward for that, you know?
Yes,
And
So you're doing all this work, but not necessarily seeing the reward.
you know,
Unless you
I
follow
track
them.
them. Yeah. And I do track them as
Okay.
long, you know, post, but not this way.
So
It's
is that
more
part of your job
this
that
way.
you track them, or you just care? So you like to see what's going on? So if
Honestly,
you can plug another
That's a good
resource
question.
in.
I would like to say it's not selfish, you know, but it is. Yeah,
I would
we
wanna
have
know.
certain,
Yeah.
we have
Mhm.
certain touch points that, you know, I need to make sure that things are being done, you know, and if there's any gaps, how I fill that gap, you know, both for future and for current. And, but it's also that thing that I want to make sure I didn't miss something. And so, you know, I track them on the backside. So it's
Mhm.
kind of like, you know, watching from a distance. It's,
Yeah.
you know, it's like when your kiddo is walking for the first time,
Mhm.
you don't want to
Yeah.
hover over them, because they're always
Right.
going to say, "Oh, well, you're going to catch me," right?
Yeah.
But sometimes falling
It's good
is
for
the
'em.
best way to learn
Yes.
how to walk.
For
And
sure.
so, you know, I'm hovering over here in the corner, kind of that stalker person, I
I
guess,
love
that's
that.
sitting over there. So
I-
yeah.
I would do the same thing. You know, I was a
Mhm.
corrections officer and for a county jail. And I would see a lot of the young people that were waiting to get sent to prison and stuff. And it's been years. 2011 was when I left. So I'll look up KDOC
Mhm.
and just see if they may had to go back,
Yeah.
if they're out, if they're
Mhm.
doing good. And I love praying for them and
Mhm.
just sending good energy and good vibes their way,
Mhm.
because we all deserve peace and happiness
Absolutely.
in our life.
Yep. Absolutely.
You guys know that you are the exception, right? I'm serious, both of you. I already know that about Izzy, but yes, I have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of the system, and there's more bad and ugly than there is
Yeah.
good.
No, I would agree to that too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Well, and that's something too that, you know, again, you know, my faith really drives me, and, you know, God has put me where I am for a reason, and I'll go in to, you know, everybody's always like, how do you remember this? How do you do this? How do you know what to say, when to say it?
Mhm.
And I was like, you know, every morning I wake up and I pray, you know, make sure that you give me the knowledge to support what I need to support today, but also the
Yes.
understanding that I may not be able to
Mm,
control
yes.
it. And, you know, and I do every day. And it's like, and at night when I go to bed, you know, dear Lord, please let what I've done today be a
Absolutely.
blessing to someone. And that is the biggest thing. I don't do this. And that's what I try to stress to my coworkers.
Mhm.
My husband and I talk about it all the time, is that, you know, it's not me.
Mhm.
You know, I'm a vessel at this point, and I am just the mechanism.
But
You know,
if you didn't
so.
have the attitude that you had, they might not be placed in
Right.
very great places,
Absolutely.
and they would be
Yeah.
set up for failure.
Yeah.
Because we talked a little bit before, talk about the guy about the living conditions, and that you had to say no.
Oh yeah. So, you know, we're working a discharge plan for a person that, you know, has the approved parole. And some of you on here who have listened to the previous shows, from what I saw, you know, the discharge to a closet.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's an approved parole. I'm going to go live, you know, with individuals, and, you know, not to get too deep in the weeds. But it was approved. And then when I start asking questions, you know, it's like, okay, well, did you vet this with the landlord?
Mhm.
Because it's an apartment complex. We have a, you know, individual with a felony history that's on parole. You kind of, if it's subsidized housing, you have to, you know, that's
Right.
not allowed, depending upon
Right.
what the charges are. And you've got all of these things, you know, and if, you know, if it's this type of charge, you can't be close to this, and, you know, those kinds of things. And it
And
was like
everybody's in an
deer.
apartment, so
Yeah.
how do you do it?
And it
That's
was
tough.
like deer in the headlights. It's like, well, I talked to the person who lives there. Oh, well, the landlord probably needs to be a person that approves
Yes.
this. Because if not, you're setting not only this
Yes.
person up to be homeless and a failure because conditions of parole, you're also hurting everyone else that lives in that apartment because
Yes.
they're all going to lose their housing. Then we're all going to have to work a planning process for everybody. And if you get evicted out of public housing,
You can't go
getting back in,
Yes.
you know, I mean,
Mhm.
those exceptions just aren't there anymore because there's not enough housing around.
Thank goodness you
So,
caught that.
Yeah.
It was
Because people get ugly, and if they would have found out and nobody knew,
yeah, absolutely.
yes.
Absolutely.
And because it was subsidized housing, he wasn't allowed in that unit anyways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So,
So when I first got out, federal, so it's a little bit different, but it was interesting because I couldn't come to my parents' house where my husband was staying,
Mhm.
my husband of 30 plus years, but they would let me go to my son's house, who was in his 20s, who had a roommate that I didn't even know his last name. Because my dad was prior military, and so there was guns. Well, they could have removed the guns,
Right,
which they would have.
yeah.
So I had to stay at my son's house, away from everybody, with no car. Everybody else was in Leavenworth. I had medical issues, so I was a good 45 minutes away. And until they could come do a home inspection, I had to stay. But they never did a home inspection of my son's house ever.
Wow.
See, yeah.
Mhm.
Because you had that discharge date.
Yes.
And the judge says, and
Well, mine was
that's
pretty quick because I wasn't supposed to get out.
Oh,
I still had another 34 months to do, but
Oh.
my prosecutor listened to my attorney phone calls, which is
Oh.
against my rights, so they had to let me out. So I got out. I had a 2-day notice.
See, and that's one of those discharge
Yes.
plans that's not going to be effective by any way, shape, or form.
No, and I understand they were trying to protect everybody, but my parents were in their 70s.
Right.
They gladly put away guns.
Well, and yeah, and you know, to be cognizant of the law and whatnot. I understand felony charges. However, pretty sure you weren't in the Fed for any of
No
those
drugs,
things that
no
would
violence.
be, yeah,
Yes.
not the violent things. And so, you
I
know,
was also very, 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 very low custody.
so yeah,
Yeah, and
conditions
low
of
risk.
parole are probably
Yes.
very, very, yeah,
I didn't even
yeah.
have to take drug testing.
So there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, you know, and that's something we look at as well. You know, you have individuals, because we also work discharge planning from jail.
Okay.
So, you know, and those are
Some
kind
people
of
never make it to prison.
those,
Their entire
yeah,
time is done
yeah,
in jail.
no, and that I would much rather work a discharge plan from the prison than the jail. It's just a lot more. It's easier because length of stay actually is equivalent to
It's
the
harder
ability to
time.
make a successful discharge plan,
Yes.
because you know you're in jail for 30, 60, 90 days, but you still have
Mhm.
all those life
And
connections
that they're also
of
going
the
back to
reason
very
that you're
soon.
the reason that
Yes.
you're in. And so,
Yes.
you know, and that's what you know. Whereas, you know, you've been in for 35 years. It's possible that most of those people that you hung out with that you got in trouble with anyway may not be around anymore.
Yes, that's what I like
or
about
not
the feds.
here. You know,
go to a different state, even.
Right,
So
yeah.
you may or may not even come back to the same area.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which is good if you are into drugs,
Absolutely.
because that drug ring, I've witnessed it.
Mhm.
We got kicked in prison
Mhm.
by the U.S. Marshals, called the
Wow.
Black Case, which was nothing but drugs at
Mhm.
CCA, and you're getting arrested in jail.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
Mhm.
It's a real
Yep,
thing,
yep.
and the business continues inside.
Yeah.
You said
indeed.
something that somebody became an addict inside.
Mhm. Yeah, I had I had
Wow.
an individual that I met after he had discharged. I wasn't part of his discharge plan, but you know, in reading his clinicals and reading his follow up, because he came in the hospital, and yeah, he had no substance use history prior to incarceration, and so you know, and that's that's part of the sad thing.
It's its own little
And not that
city.
he was a nice fellow before he went into the prison.
Sure.
There, you know,
Yeah, there's some
but
people that need
yeah,
to be in there.
yeah, and he you know, but he was a clean, a
Mhm.
nice fellow, you know. So.
Which is actually a little more dangerous in my
Sometimes
mind.
it is.
You know, I have
definitely.
met the nicest people that have come out mean.
Mhm.
I have met the meanest people coming in who have come out nice.
Mhm.
And I've met some of the coolest people that are very good friends of mine in
Absolutely.
prison. I've met some people I never want to see again.
Absolutely.
So it's
Absolutely.
just like here. It's
Yeah, I
just
was
like
going to
being on
say
the
it's just
outside.
like life. You know,
Yes.
I went to college for 4 years, and there are people that I engaged in college, high school, whatnot, that you know, I'm good with not seeing you ever again. But then there's others that, you know, I keep in close contact with, I see on a regular basis, you know, and again, that's part of life, and, you know, your ability to make choices. And unfortunately, sometimes our people aren't allowed to make choices, and that's what
This is
creates a
true.
lot of those barriers too.
For sure.
How long have you been doing this?
This particular piece I've been doing since 2019.
Okay.
case management and discharge planning across the board. I've been doing it since about 93. So
Oh, wow.
yeah,
It's a
so
career.
It is definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did COVID play into that?
It was horrible.
I couldn't even imagine.
It was horrible because, I mean, the good thing was it opened up the opportunity, because before then, a lot of the discharge planning wasn't as robust because people just weren't engaging in Teams and Zoom and that kind of thing at that point. Once COVID hit, everybody had to. And so everybody had to learn that. And so it opened up that opportunity. Everybody had to have those platforms available.
So it was kind of a good
So
thing on the back
that
end.
piece of it was
Yes.
good. But the discharge plan itself was really difficult because nothing's open,
Yeah.
and so, really being able to make sure that, let's say a condition of parole is employment.
Yeah. How are they going to get a job? And if you don't have a job, you go back.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, there were some caveats that were allowable, but it did create, it made us more creative, I guess.
Yeah.
It created creativity that, necessity is the mother of invention. And that really made
true.
us look even more outside the box than we already do.
Nice.
What's the oldest that you've discharged?
The fellow that I just recently
75?
discharged. Yeah.
Mhm.
I do have, we have some talks of maybe an individual that's older than that. The other fellow I'm working on right now, he's about the same age. And so, but that's the oldest at this point,
That
which kind of
mindset.
surprises me.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine going in that long ago
Mhm.
and coming out to just the technology? I mean,
Mm-mm.
just
Oh,
the 4
yeah.
years that I was away,
Oh, yeah.
the technology
You don't know how to use
had
the phone.
changed. Yes.
No. Computers,
what is this?
phones, none
Mhm.
of these things. And so that's a huge education piece.
Let alone working.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like you mentioned at the beginning, my dad just passed away, and he was stuck in Star Trek land. He still had a flip phone. I could not
He
get him to
did.
get a,
He did. And don't text
yeah,
him.
no, and don't text him because he would never
Mhm.
read it. He would show us the phone and say, delete these. I don't, would
Mhm.
just, now my mom, she embraces it. She's, got her phone now, and she
Mhm.
FaceTimes and all that good stuff and texts even now.
Nice.
But she didn't.
But she
Yes.
didn't when my dad
Mhm.
was alive. And, to think about these individuals are the same age as my dad,
Yeah.
but yet they've never seen the progress. I watched on TikTok last night, these two kids, this parent put a rotary phone in front of them. It was like, you have 4 minutes to dial this phone number. And they could not accomplish it. But think about it. When they went in, the rotary phone was all they had.
Right.
Yes.
So when they
right.
come out and they look at this stuff now, I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
who has a
Push
home
button.
phone anymore?
Yes.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
we don't.
No, everybody. So they're sitting here going,
Where is the phone?
You
Is
know,
I'm
what
like,
they're
we're
thinking.
talking
Even
technology,
TV.
but I'm like, let these older people come out and just live amongst millennials.
Right?
Yeah, the people are
Yeah.
yes.
Create that village. So then there's that support system of young people to teach
And they're
the
coming,
IT.
they're coming out to disrespect too.
Well, that's the other
That's
thing
a
too.
huge
That is
thing.
huge thing.
Yeah.
And, when you're incarcerated, and those of you that are watching, I have not been incarcerated, but just in talking to individuals that I work discharge plans with, you have that hierarchy
Mhm.
of, the society
Yep.
inside. And so it's very structured, and it's very pointed. Whereas, and not to get political, but right now we have no structure
Yes, that's
in the
right.
countries, and in the
Mhm.
world necessarily. And to come out to that where, when you walk down the street, no matter who you were, whether you were nice or not,
Mhm.
it was sir and thank you and
Mhm.
open the doors.
Yes,
and
ma'am. No, ma'am.
yeah. And you
Mhm.
didn't disrespect the elderly. You didn't, you looked people in the eye, you shook their hands, and that is not what
Yeah.
happens now.
Mhm.
And that's a difficult thing. It's difficult for me, and I've been around now for 54
Acclimated to
years,
it, yeah.
and I'm acclimated to it. It's difficult, but those individuals who haven't, and they're coming from that very structured, guided, lack of choice environment to this,
Well, it's like,
Yeah.
it can be overwhelming.
People who served a lot of time in the military and coming out, that's a huge transition.
Yeah.
And without the proper guidance and support, there's going to be issues.
Well, and I'm prior military, and when I came out of basic training, I remember, again, basic training is extreme. And when I came out to my training school, I set my dorm room up to the same standards as what I did at basic training.
Okay.
And I remember them coming in to do a room inspection. They're like, you don't have to line this up and this up and this up and fold your towels this way.
But that was
you
where your
know,
mindset was.
But that's where it was. And
Mhm.
it took me a long time to get out of that.
Mhm.
And even to this day, when I fold my towels, I still fold my towels like basic training. I tried to fold them another way and it's just like, it's just too hard. But, those kinds of things are things that you don't realize. And that also has to be something to take into account for,
Mhm.
because, if you throw somebody who has had one roommate, somebody can come into their room at any time and toss it, those kinds of things. And then you go into another environment that doesn't have those rules and those regulations, and you have that one person that crosses you, or that one person who starts guiding you the wrong direction, it's easy,
It is easy.
and
Yes.
there's not enough training
No.
on the discharge planning piece. So
And
Well, I would say you don't really learn leadership skills in
Mm-mm.
prison.
no,
Natural leaders, it will emerge.
Right,
But
yeah.
you don't really learn those leadership skills.
absolutely.
So did I understand correctly? Do you also help with women who give birth while they're in prison?
So I haven't had the opportunity to do that, but I would. And honestly, that type of a plan, I mean, I've prepared myself for it
Okay.
because I know it's going to happen at
Yes,
some
yes.
point.
What would that look like?
So, well, in my mind, it's going to be very similar to a standard discharge plan, but also very member centric. Because you're not only discharging one individual, you're discharging two individuals. And there's going to be a lot of different things that
that's
are
a good
involved,
point.
because you could have foster care involved. You could have, for instance, biological father who is not with mother anymore, who wants to take custody, but you need to work this, so there's going to be a
That's
lot of
tricky.
those pinpoints in there. But on the same aspect too, I have a tendency to focus on the child.
As you should.
And
'Cause
and
that's
it's
what needs protected.
absolutely,
Yes.
they can't protect themselves. And every moms differently,
Yes.
right? But we also have to understand that not every mom has good intentions, but
They don't.
they may not be the right intentions.
Right.
And so, working that type of a discharge plan, again, asking questions, listening is probably the biggest thing.
Right.
And when you start listening to people, they start opening up. And when they start that trust piece, that's when the planning really gets fun, because, there's going to be times that this is just not going to work. This is going to be, but again, that honesty and saying, okay, here's the deal. They may not like it, but they're going to respect it because, you're being honest and open with them.
Right.
And so, it's something that I've always planned in the back of my mind, because,
it could happen any
it could
day.
happen any day. Yeah.
So
I want to reiterate real quick. You said good intentions are not always the right intentions. And I think that's important for people to note, because, I mention this a lot when I'm speaking. You could be a good-hearted person, but it doesn't mean you're showing up without wreaking havoc in other people's lives.
very
So good intentions are not always the right intentions. So pay attention to that.
That was pretty good. I had a gal who gave birth, and her child could never see her while she was in prison because the father was also in prison, and the in-laws, the grandparents on the other side, made that stipulation. So when even though her parents had custody, they could not bring her to visitation, and she was in for 8 years.
Wow.
So I'm not sure what that looked like afterwards.
See, and that's the thing that is just really, really hard as well, is because now you're not only working a discharge plan to go out, you're working a reintegration plan.
Yes.
And so, in the foster care system, that's the word that they use, whether it's reintegration or not, and reintegration means that the family unit, that's the goal, is to unify that family unit again and to bring everything together. And sometimes it's, option, sometimes it's not, for whatever reasons. And so at that point, you're dealing with the child's trauma of not having mom around or dad around.
Right.
Yes, and the battle of the grandparents.
Yeah, and then you
because,
have that trauma
you
between
can
each
have custody
other.
if she can't see her.
Right.
Yes.
And then now you're working, okay, I'm going to come back into your life and be available and hopefully supportive. But she's, at an age when I've already kind of developed my personality, so to speak. And so, this
child would now be
tough.
11.
Yeah, that's tough,
Yeah,
especially in those formative years.
Yeah.
Very much so. We go in, Isabel and I both go in and talk to the youth. And I've always looked at it as me telling my story and that the person who's incarcerated can overcome. But I had a principal tell me, we have a lot of children whose parents are incarcerated. So they struggle with that self-esteem and their worth and their value. And I never looked at it from that viewpoint. And it's a big deal.
Well, and I mean, you look at kids are not nice people.
No.
They just aren't. And, whether intentionally or not intentionally, because they're that kind of that chalkboard that, people write on them all the time and then they get erased and then they get rewritten on and all of that. And so they're really trying to find their niche and whatnot. And, they're going to talk to those kids because they're judgmental because they only have this small amount of knowledge. But, but then everybody else, again, it comes back to honesty and how you react. Because when you get that reaction, and so those kids, not only do they need, and there's not a lot of peer support.
No, there's not.
And, with adults, we have peer support. We preach that peer support,
and
getting,
kids make fun
surrounding yourself. Yeah.
Cruel.
But how are you going to develop a peer support when the people who went through it are adults?
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
you can have groups and you can talk about it and everything, but the people that are leading the groups are adults. And so you don't really have that. You have the mentoring, but not the peer. And,
they don't understand.
And they're going to develop those peers. You get that group gang mentality almost, where it's like, okay, well, we're going to circle the wagons and we're going to, push everyone away. Or we're just going to let everybody do whatever they want because it's learned helplessness at that point. And it's just, that's just something that is missing.
Yeah. And as someone who had parents who were not good examples to me and made not great decisions in their life that made them not be able to always be present in mine and my siblings' life and everything, unintentionally, other people, especially in the family, they don't realize what they're doing, but they're making comparisons. Well, you're just like your father. You're just like your mother. Well, it only takes a couple of years before you start believing it. And if that's what they're doing, well, if I'm just like them, then I should be doing it too.
Exactly.
And they follow suit.
Yep.
Words are powerful.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
They are powerful.
Absolutely. The old saying that, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me is really not accurate at all.
No, it's not.
Because that cut that those words make lasts forever,
Yes, murders have been over it. Divorces have been over it.
absolutely.
Families split up over it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you ask somebody, you could probably ask, I would imagine, I know myself, you could ask me, oh, well, when you got into this, tussle in high school or fight in high school, somebody punched you or whatever. I'm not necessarily going to remember that, but I do remember the time that I had a lady tell me a ton of negative things about me in Sunday school. And, as much as I've forgiven her, I've moved on, I still remember all those words that she said to me and how, fortunately, I was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. It wasn't that I'm going to mirror what you say me,
it could have been
but
bad.
it could be. And there were other people that, it did. And it was just, and she wasn't intending to be mean, but it came out that way. And it was like, hold on. You are not going to be self-fulfilling prophecy for me. I am going to rise to love. And so,
and how old were you then?
I was 17. Wow. I was 17, but that's not always how it is.
No, it's
Right.
not.
But I had great men. I had my mom and dad. I had, other adults in my life, and I had that outlet to be able to continue to form and go in the right direction. A lot of these kids don't.
No,
and
they
so,
don't.
Those words are how they follow. And like you
there's
said,
a lot of
if
suicide
that's what
over
you're saying.
words.
Absolutely.
A lot of
Absolutely.
suicide over
Bullying
words.
and those kinds of
Yes.
things. It's just,
It's very unfortunate.
Mhm.
And kids are cruel to begin with.
Right.
So then you start adding other things, giving them a reason
Right.
Mhm.
that could be proven.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
It's a powerful thing.
Yep.
This has been very educational.
Yes.
Yes. So what would you tell a returning citizen that's getting ready to come out in a week?
Ask a lot of questions. Don't let no be told to you. continue to push for what you need and find your family.
And this is for the family so that you can relay that to them, because they won't be able to see this. But as the family members, ask a lot of questions. Ask a lot of questions. Well, thank you, Susan. It has been fun. I'm going to turn on some of these commercials, and you guys stay tuned for more great stories. We've got the Tripodis coming up. You're just gonna have to wait and hear that story. It's fantastic. We have some other folks that have just some stories that you wouldn't even imagine that people could live through. See you soon.
Or do you want to be the person that's helpful, that soothes, that loves? Because you can still stand tall and be as big as you want to be when you are this person.